And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Earth is a Witness. I am Parimal Deshpande, producer and host for Earth is a Witness, a program that we do almost every week to invite photographers and storytellers from all around the world to share interesting stories of interconnectedness, to go beyond just beautiful, pretty pictures. So with that, welcome you all. I do want to welcome my good friend and artist in residence, Art Wolfe. Art, how are you?
I'm excellent. Thanks for asking.
Thank you, Art. Okay. Today, again, is a really interesting photographer. He is dialing Earth is a Witness from Canada, and Canada on the kind of, Toronto side. So it's quite late there. And in terms of introductions, very, very high accomplishments. Just one thing I'll say is also been as the Order of Canada. And I want to know actually what that means. It's a really very high up there civilian award that's given to Canadians for the highest service to humanity. And we'll talk about that too. But the topic is also equally interesting. And the topic is symbols and meaning. And, you often, kind of in life go around doing your things and some things happen in your life. They're often symbols. And you kind of ask yourself and wonder, why is that happening and what does it mean? And there's often a meaning to that. And that meaning, if we tap into that meaning, to these symbols, can help us lead our life and tell our story. And that's the topic today. So with that, I want to welcome Freeman Patterson. Freeman, welcome to Earth is a Witness.
Thank you very much, Parimal, and hello there, Art.
Hi, Freeman. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
I got to say, Freeman, before we get started with symbols and meaning and your work and your stories, because I'm intrigued. You have said that there are some really interesting stories, almost metaphysical stories, which I'm intrigued by. We have interviewed about 30 plus photographers on Earth as our witness. And I got to say, this is the one in which so many of the photographers we have interviewed, many of them big names themselves, reached out to me saying, wow, you have Freeman. We are going to dial in today for Freeman. So a lot of our audience today is actually photographers whom we have interviewed. And it's really endearing. They said, you know what? He's such a big guy. He probably doesn't know us, but we know him and we've been inspired by him. And they shared with me a few stories about traveling with you, let's say to Antarctica or somewhere. And this is said from our side, please say hi to Freeman. He probably doesn't even know who we are, but he has inspired us a lot. So Freeman, I just wanted to share that with you and also for our audience. So it's a true honor.
Well, thank you so much. And
okay.
The one thing I'd like to start off by saying is that ever since I started photography, which was about 177 years ago, I noticed right off the bat that photographers always ask questions of how, or what camera do you use, what lens, what computer program, and they'll talk about techniques. So there's a tremendous emphasis among photographers on craft, which is important. But very seldom do I hear them asking the why questions. In other words, why over a period of years, for example, do I always photograph this? Why do I always have that subject matter? Or why did I stop somewhere along the way completely and change subject matter? We all try all kinds of different things, but what are my constants in subject matter and what are my changes? And the other thing is, how has my approach or style been changing? Has it changed abruptly? Has it changed slowly? And what does that say? Because the changes that you make in the subject matter and the changes you make in your approach to photographing it, you made them, they stand for you. And if we go back through our work and look at our images, we can find we've written our life story, provided we're making photographs for ourselves.
Go ahead. Yeah, sorry. Cool. So should I start sharing, Freeman?
Sure.
I'm going to share and tell me that you can see it, and let's get started. Can't wait.
So we'll have the first image up.
Yeah. Let me know when I should start.
That's the middle image, not the first image. There we go.
Should I go to the next?
Go to the first image. There we are. Way back in the late 80s, I was doing one of three solo motorcycle trips I've done of South Island, New Zealand. 2 weeks, just flew into Christchurch, got on a motorcycle, disappeared for 2 weeks, absolutely no plans whatever. And one morning in 1987, I was riding up the east coast of South Island, very, very, very early in the morning. And I came to what were not so famous then, but are more famous now, the Miraki Boulders. And these are small, round, or huge round rocks emerging out of the mud and the beaches of the Southern Ocean. So here I am on the beach about, I don't know, 6 in the morning. No one else was around. And I started to photograph these and I got extremely turned on. And I'm going around and around and around, looking at all of these different things, different boulders round, all of them round. Move to the next one. Now, when subject matter gets you like that and you find you're on a high, when there's high emotional content to what you're doing, you don't have to stop and figure out why, what it means to you at the time. But it means that the subject matter, the thing that you're photographing, has taken on symbolic value for you. And it's imbued with meaning, usually which you do not understand at the time. And it only comes out as you continue your photography in that situation and in related situations. Because in the next image, for the next, say, 3 or 4 years.
Can I forward?
Yep. Whenever I say in the next image, you can go ahead. Okay. Here I am now in one of the deserts in Africa, and I come around this great bunch of boulders, and here's this one standing out, backlighted against the desert landscape. And it just stopped me in my tracks, and I had to photograph. It had power and it had energy for me. And so then, if you go to the next one,
go to the next one, Parimal.
Yeah, I did. There's a delay. There's a 5-second delay.
Okay.
Here, I'm on another motorcycle trip. This time, I'm along the Great Ocean Road in Australia, in South Australia. I never get to states if it's Victoria or South Australia. Anyway, the Great Ocean Road. And what they're famous for, the Great Ocean Road, is the remarkable views of the great rock formations, the 12 Apostles. So I've pulled the bike over and I'm standing there, and there's some other people around, and they're all aiming their cameras out at the great rock formations. What am I looking at? Another circle. And only this circle is small, and it's having a very bad hair day. I mean, and only later did I realize a transition was taking place. Not too long later, I had a project, and I had to go back through about 30 years of my work, and I decided not to start at the beginning and worked up to the present, but to start at the present and work back. And this was a transition image. I didn't realize it at the time. Who would get turned on by this? Only me. I was really excited because it marked my not complete abandonment of circles, which stand for wholeness and centeredness and a goal in all cultures and to individuals. But I was giving it up, and texture or weave was taking over. And it was very significant, as you'll see in some of the subsequent images.
Can I ask a question Freeman?
Sure may.
So you said people often don't ask the question why. Let me ask you the question why. Why did you change from circles to weaves, and what led you to that transition?
Well, we'll look at the next photograph and we'll try and answer it with that.
But before you go,
okay.
So this is a circle and it's emulating energy outward, whereas the previous circles, as you just said, are like they contain the energy. This one's releasing the energy.
That's right. It's a very good observation, Art, and you're exactly right. And just as I made this image, so I'm trying to think of how old I was. Well, and then this next one, which is related, a year and a half later, after the previous image, I was standing one December morning at my kitchen sink, and I was washing dishes. And over my kitchen sink, there is a big window, and I can look out across a field to the forest. And it had snowed, and then it had melted. Before that, all the grasses had been pounded down by previous snowstorms. And I found myself doing the dishes, and then I came to, and I realized I hadn't washed any dishes for like 7 or 8 minutes. I was just standing there, looking, staring at the field. So I went and I got a camera with a wide-angle lens, not because I wanted to show perspective, but I went out on the deck and I took quite large sections, images like this, of the field. Now, no camera club in the history of camera clubs would ever take their people to a field like this for a field trip. Nothing there, but everything is there. You'll notice there's the 2 tonal extremes. There's white, and there's little pinpricks of black all through it. And then the brown that shows of the grass, it's a mid-tone. Anyway, I came in, made myself a cup of tea, went back out on the deck and sat and looked at it and said, what the hell's going on here? Because I was high as a kite. I was just, had filled with energy. I knew it had taken on symbolic value for me. It was a symbol. What was a symbol of? So you know how when we sometimes have a problem or a question, we'll sit down and ponder it, and we may come up with the right answer, but not recognize that it is the right answer and go marching right on by. And that happened to me that morning, because at some point, as I sat there sipping my tea, I said to myself, well, you know, this field really looks like I'd like my life to look like. And then I thought, oh, for heaven's sake. And I kept on going. And then I suddenly came back and I looked at the field and I said, it's exactly what I want my life to look like. It's integrated. The highlights, the dark shadows, the middle tones, in other words, the highlights of my life, the horrible experiences, all of the in-between daily experiences, they're integrated. Every part of it's different, and yet it all functions. And that's what I'd like my life to be like. It just makes such sense.
You know, I take a lot of shots like that in more recent years. And I think the fellow photographers that are watching tonight would attribute your abstractions early on for influencing the way many of us see. And when I look at this image, Freeman, I'm thinking of Jackson Pollock, and what he said of his work is that where his paintings end, your imaginations begin. So you see the integration of your life, highlights and middle tones and all that, and yet other people may look at this and read into something different. And it's an even playing field that enables us to enter. And I think, you know, a picture of a mountain with a lake is fairly defined, where an image like this, you can interpret it in your own way.
Sure. By the way, Jackson Pollock is one of my very favorite painters. I just love Jackson Pollock's work.
As I do as well. And in fact, I teach workshops now, kind of educating people on William de Kooning and Pollock and Rothko, and then we go out and find in discarded environments beautiful images that imply what they were after as well. But this is your evening, and I can see you at that kitchen table really getting enthralled with this.
Yeah. Well,
kitchen window, I should say.
Kitchen window, sure. You can go to the next photograph.
I have a question, Freeman, here.
Sure.
And feel free to tell me that you'll answer that in the next image. The question I have is it the image that's speaking to you and essentially signaling via its symbols to you that this is the life that you want to live, an integrated life of highs, lows, and mediums? Or is it your subconscious mind attaching meaning to something that may not even be there?
Well,
what drives what?
Well, what's happening is a symbol is a thing or an image that gains its symbolic value for anybody because it generates an emotional response in that person. It stands for something else than what it is. And this scene, I looked at it, it stimulated that emotional response. I didn't know what it was, but I came up with the answer in this case quite quickly. I'll show you some other examples later in which I did not come up with them quickly, but boy, were they powerful symbols.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. I'm just going to read a quick comment from one of our viewers, and you don't have to answer that, but I do feel it's an interesting comment for how others are seeing it, and we'll proceed to the next one. And I'll proceed this. It may be me and high on listening to you, Freeman, but I see the lighted areas changing to different areas. Is it my imagination or something deeper? So people clearly can relate to what you're expressing here.
I would not be surprised. I really don't know. Every viewer will be different. But a photograph with that amount of, and you might say, detail in it, the lights particularly will come forward and the darks will recede. So you may very well have personal motion as you see that.
Yeah.
When after I made that image, I went around for the next two, I realized what textures meant for me. And so I went around looking for naturally occurring weaves. And here I am in Chile at a marsh, and I have that same kind of reaction that I had at my kitchen window. So I made it. You know, there's no two parts, it's different everywhere. And yet the whole thing is an integrated tapestry, as it were. Like an integrated life, if I may say so. And I once showed this image to a woman, well, to a group, and the woman piped up and she said, "Oh, Freeman," she said, "I really like this," but she said, "It would be so much nicer if there were a duck swimming around in it somewhere in the water." And I said to her, "Ma'am," I said, "I waited until the damn duck flew away." I didn't want to take anything away from the integration. And so then you go to the next one.
Art, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, these photos, your eye moves evenly throughout as in the previous image, and you keep rotating throughout that image, and the graceful lines are one more in, you know, rounded form as with the first 3 or 4 images. And now graceful curved lines, they're all pleasing to our eyes. So patterns, textures, lines, they're universally pleasing to our eye. Now, Freeman is getting more meaning behind them beyond just the beauty of the lines.
Yep, well said, Art.
Okay, let's go to the next one.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
No, beyond this one. Oh, yeah, there is a delay,
yeah.
And I jump on you, don't I?
Well, there's just two, yeah, and you can just cycle through this one quickly to the next one, but this was right around my home. See, I'm still, to this day, looking for photographs which have no point of dominance or no real center of interest. Because even here, you see there's highlights, there's all the tonal ranges there from black. And here, then I moved on, creating textures simply by changing shutter speeds when I photograph moving objects. And this is water shooting out of a garden hose, which I photographed backlighted about, I don't know, 500ths of a second. I couldn't see it, but I could imagine what would happen. And when I saw the results, I just went, yes, oh, you know, I had that feeling of it's different everywhere. There are places that have warm hues, cooler hues, more neutral hues. Again, the total tonal range from white to black and all the in-between tones. And so it has that degree of integration. Now, what I said when I showed you the first field of the snow, the photograph of the snowy field, was it's what I would like my life to be like. And we aspire to that. I aspire to that. Like everyone else, I'm human. It isn't always integrated in the way I would like it to be.
Yeah. There is a theme, Freeman, that I know you and I have talked about this on the phone. And maybe this is a good time to ask that question is, how important is it that others like your work?
It shouldn't be important at all. You're only going to find symbols. Look, let me just step back. Those of us who have worked professionally as a photographer for a short period, and especially like Art and I, all of our lives, pretty well, that we have worked for a lot of professional clients. And we have to keep what they want in mind and try and please them. So what we do for them ordinarily does not provide a great chance to ask the why questions or take the pictures that provoke them. So I always use my learning or my professional job, so to speak, to improve my craft. But for I haven't been doing assignments now for quite a long time. And so I shoot for myself. It is absolutely critical if you're going to find the value in your art to photograph for yourself. Because if someone else is dictating your subject matter, and if someone else is telling you how to go about it, do a documentary or an impressionistic or an expressionistic image, they're taking you away from you. So it's vital that you shoot always for yourself, even if you're doing jobs for other people.
Absolutely.
Wow, look at, yeah.
And look where he's finding his subjects. I mean, out the kitchen window, a garden hose in the yard, you know, and it could have been anywhere. It could have been anywhere on the planet, but he finds these inner photos where most people are journeying across the planet to find that one shot. He's creating that one shot within, you know, sight of his home. I think that's the takeaway beyond the metaphors and the cerebral nature of his work. It's also the very fact that he is finding amazing work right at his home.
Amazing.
Art, just to pick up on that, one of the favorite things I say to my workshop students is the best place in the entire world to make photographs is wherever you are.
Wow.
There's no better place than here.
It's as a photographer, true definition of being in the moment. Wow, this is fascinating. Could I go to the next one? Would you like me to?
Yes, you may go to the next one. Okay, now here I'm going to tell a story. I know that some people who are listening have heard the story, but I know that a lot of people will not have heard it. 21 years ago, in other words, right after the change of the millennium in January 2000, I had not one, but two liver transplants 5 days apart. Mm-hmm. My first transplant failed and I went into rejection. I was put on life support where I stayed for 5 days, but I was jumped to the head of the list in all of Canada for the next available compatible liver. 5 days later, I received it. I was kept in an induced coma for 6 weeks.
Oh my God.
When I woke up, or when I was allowed to wake up early in March, excuse me, my transplant surgeon came by and he said, Freeman, he said, you've had 2 transplants, not 1. He said, I want you to know that you have won the national lotto 5 weeks in a row. You should not be here. He said, you had less than 1% chance of surviving that second operation.
Wow.
When that happens, let's say it's very liberating. It was a life-changing experience, quite obviously. That's the background. I've taught workshops 3 times now, well south of the Dead Sea in Israel, in a little moshav agricultural village called Faran, on the edge of the Arava Desert. Near the little village of Faran, there are about 800 of these fabric greenhouses where they grow mostly sweet peppers, but sunflowers for the European market. One of the 2 best places in the world to grow peppers, apparently. Anyway, this row of greenhouses is temporarily empty. It's about a block long. So I took the workshop, all 3 of the workshops I was doing that year. This was in 2016. I took them to there just as a place to make photographs. And some people really liked it, and some were bored out of their mind, and some was, come see, come saw. I couldn't stay away from the place. So between the workshops, I found myself there at crack of dawn. I'd go back, I'd shoot for 2 or 3 hours until I was exhausted emotionally. I'd be back there again at noon. I'd be back in the late afternoon and at sunset. And I did this and did it anyway, and I'm deleting images as I shoot. But I still came back to Canada with 3,300 images. Now, what can you do with 3,300 images? I knew something was going on. I didn't know what, and I didn't try to figure out what. I just took advantage of the fact I can shoot these while I'm here. So anyway, when I have a print agent. So first thing when I got back home, I took the 3,300 images and for myself, cut them to 750. And then for my print agent, I said, well, he can't look at 750 images. I'm going to cut them by 90%. So I cut them down to 75. And in the process, I discovered the symbol. So I'm going to show you these photographs, one after the other. I'll ask you just to go from one to the next, and I'll tell you the story, and then we can have all kinds of questions afterward.
Okay, I'll go to the next.
So go to the next one now.
Yep, just did.
Okay, so this first image is really a photograph of me, or my body in 1988 and 1999, especially late in 1999. And the first part of 2000, in the first half of January. I could barely walk. I was I was in horrible, horrible shape. That's me. That's what I looked like and felt like.
Beaten up
Then,
and falling apart.
Absolutely. I could barely do anything.
Go next.
But I was on the transplant list. Yes, you go next. And then I was doing, this shows me on the 22nd, we'll say, of January. On that day, I took all my vital signs, my temperature, my blood pressure, and so on. And I realized how more I had gone downhill in the last month. So I sent an email to the doctor at the University of Toronto Hospital, or the U of T Hospital, Toronto General rather, who had done my workup test for a liver transplant. I sent the same email to my family doctor and to the head of the transplant clinic in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is not far away from where I live, really. Anyway, I knew I was days away from dying. And there's the photograph. That is a photograph of me the night I sent that email. You can literally see the skeleton behind, and there's the death shroud waiting for me.
Wow.
4 days later, the call came.
Next image.
Next image. So there, for the next several weeks, first of all, I was in intensive care for a very, very long time. I had tubes coming in my nostrils, in my arms, even in my mouth. I have virtually no memory of being there, except now and then when I moved from intensive care into the step-down unit, where I was for about a month. I became gradually aware now and then. And I, of course, these were so horrible. I was trying to pull them out and everything. But that triangle over in there, that's me in there. I'm in intensive care, and I'm almost like an incubator. So next picture, in the next one.
If I can just add, it almost feels like you're rising from the ashes, almost. You're rising.
I hope. I just think of this in the tent. I'm in a tent, like so many of the people who are suffering so badly from COVID-19 are in highly intensive care. So as they began to let me out of what's the word I'm trying to think about? My unconscious state, anyway.
Coma.
Coma, right. The coma, very slowly. And you can see, I still can't see clearly, but there's light out there. You can see a door. I can see a door. It's almost as through that veil, I can see I'm going somewhere. There's a place. And literally, and this is something else which I'll mention, although we didn't go into it in any detail. I dreamed, and I remember the sequence of dreams I had in the 6 weeks I was in that coma. I literally dreamed myself in the dreams from near death to life, to being, in a sense, born again, to use an evangelical Christian term. But anyway, here I am. I'm getting the first glimpses that maybe I'm going to come out. And then we can keep going to the next. And then here the fabric is beginning to lift, as it were. And I'm getting the first glimpse of light and air without a curtain, without a fabric, seeing, you might say, the world again with clear eyes. And then the process was gradual. So in the next image, which you can go to, the change is getting more rapid. Now I'm seeing a much larger area here, huge, large area, but everything is still undefined. I'm still not seeing clearly. And then it moves more quickly. And in the next image, finally, I can see with the whole journey. Now, if you go to the bottom of the image here, to the bottom of this red fabric, see how narrow it is. And then it gets, as it comes up through the image, it gets wider and wider and wider. And by the time I'm about nearly 50% of the way up through the image, my arms are spreading wide and I'm literally embracing life again. This is my photograph of liberation.
Mm. Wow.
It's beautiful and it's striking. And I love the metaphor. I didn't want to interrupt, but I was with you the whole way. And I think, yeah, to be able to tell your story, your truth through these images is pretty amazing. And this one in particular reminds me, what is it, Carrizo? Or what were those artists that wrapped islands in orange, striking orange?
I know who you mean.
Yeah, but it's and your fellow Canadian, that did the book Manufactured Landscape on the cover of his book. He had this orange river of
Edward Burtinsky.
Edward Burtinsky. So this color and this expansion, I get it. I mean, it's really quite striking how you phrased it and how that photo supports the entire journey that you just discussed.
Yeah. Now there's two more images in the sequence. So let's go to the next one.
Before I forward, Freeman,
okay,
I just want to +1 to what Art said. It's just so interesting storytelling with the symbols, and this particular one in red, almost to me, and also the other reds that you can see emerging, feels like the vein of blood, the blood flowing through all the veins coming back.
Absolutely. And I can tell you, when I made this image, I remember the making of it. And I mean, I made others similar to it, but I was on a high. I'm just drifting. I mean, I'm just flying in there because it was, in other words, it was a symbol of all the elation I felt to coming back to life. Yeah. After 99% of chances, I mean, I won the lotto big time.
Yeah, incredible.
And here I am now, I'm released from hospital and I feel like I'm an acrobat or a gymnast in Cirque du Soleil. I'm up there flitting among the wires and the trampolines and everything. So this is my Cirque du Soleil feeling that I had.
This has the feel of a exuberance of childhood, almost playfulness.
Well, you've hit on something there. One of the things when I realized here I am, I survived. One of the things I made a very conscious decision to do. And this is a whole story which we can't possibly go into. But I said, finally, I am going to have a happy childhood. You're never too old to have a happy childhood.
Wow. We did hit upon something there. That's a story, sounds like for another time.
And there's one more image which you can show. And this is pretty well a photograph of me ever since. You can see you're speaking about arteries and veins. Look at the energy and the blood flowing and the strength and the power. And I am very happy to say 21 years later, I am healthier and more fit than I was probably at 40.
Wow.
Excellent.
So those are my images.
Wonderful. Thank you. I have so many questions. Go ahead, Art. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so do you visualize your life as before the operation? And when you look at your work, is there a psychology of, I mean, we hopefully all of us evolve our eye and our intellect, and hopefully tomorrow you'll be a better photographer than today. But do you look back at the pre-operation Freeman and his work, or is a linear line throughout? Or as you said, when you got a new lease on life, are you even more abstract and free? And so just speak a little bit about that.
Well, if I go back before the work, well, I showed you, or before the transplants, I showed you images that I made of the circle of mud that was having a bad hair day. I showed you the texture images made and the picture from my window. So I'm paying attention to the symbols that were appearing naturally in my work before the transplants. So in a sense, I had that background. And I didn't set out to tell the story of my transplants. And in fact, 15 years had gone by before I shot those pictures of the fabric greenhouses. But I'd done a lot of thinking and a lot of cogitating about life in the 15 years since. And somehow, here I am on the edge of the desert with these, and my unconscious takes over. And it fastens, it gives those greenhouses, it gives them feeling for me. It gives them energy. And when you feel that, and I say this to everyone, photographer, when you photograph, when something you say, I really want to do that, do it. And maybe it'll just dwindle out. And maybe you won't go far with it. But every now and then, you can't drop something. And just go with it. Don't give it up until the symbol becomes clear. And it may not become, I mean, it was months. It was after all the editing took place that in the editing process of all those images, I said, okay, now I understand what was going on there in the desert with those greenhouses. You see, art, it's very like dreaming. There's a huge, well, both art and our artistic creations and our dreams belong uniquely to us. No one else may have similar dreams, but no one else dreams your dreams. No one else creates your art. So both of these things are you. So this is why it's so important not to copy, but just to create for yourself. And if you put your stuff on Facebook and everyone hates it, yay! Because art is not about ego gratification. If you're worried about do people like my work, you're worried about the wrong thing.
Well, I love that.
Yeah. No, it's being true. It's being true to your vision, to your own identity, and to have critics that say, hey, it's too bad there's not a duck in that image. It's just, they haven't gotten to the visual acuity that you as an artist have achieved, and the metaphors around it and all those things. You know, people often when they talk about photographs, they cling to technology as you started out. And that's how they refer to photos. Oh, what did you use? As if that was a critically important part of the process of creating. Yeah. And it's not.
Do you know, Art, it's interesting. I often think you put a bunch of guys together in this country anyway, in Canada, you know, and they've all got their beers and the conversation will probably gravitate to hockey and trucks. And no one will ever talk about why they're interested in hockey and in trucks. In other words, they never go there. And the why questions, most of us don't ask the why questions. And when you start making art for yourself and paying attention to your dreams, and I was talking to Parimal today, I said I had the very good fortune of doing some dream work very early in my life, and it's been something I've stayed with. And the parallels between working with the symbols in my dreams and the symbols in my art has been very, very productive.
I have a question, Freeman. What signal, you said you had taken 7,500 plus images and eventually you culled it down to 75, images. So what signal did you use to cull it down so that you can find your symbol, you can discover your symbol?
Well, obviously, if my craft, so to speak, was poor, they just went out, if there was some technical thing I didn't want. But basically, when I was doing the editing, I had to feel it. In other words, if it felt, I can't let this go, then I held on to it. So my decision was highly subjective, as it should be. We look at craft objectively. We have to look at art subjectively. In other words, if someone says they look at a very non-representational image, if they say, what is it? They're asking the wrong question, totally wrong. The question is, how do I feel about it?
You said craft does not produce art.
That's right.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, I mean, look, anyone working in the visual arts, painting, sculpture, photography, gardening, has to know the tools and the techniques of the particular medium. You have to know craft. But you can become very good at knowing the craft, but not say anything. It's exactly like a language. At the ripe old age of 71, I decided, I don't speak French. I want to learn to speak French. So I took myself off to Quebec and went into immersion, did that a couple of times. I'm still not fluent, but I can live comfortably in French now. Now, here's the thing. Whether or not I ever say anything worthwhile in French is a totally different matter. In other words, I've learned the craft. I've learned about grammar. I've learned about composition, all of these things. But whether I'm saying anything of value or not is totally different.
Wow.
So
I'm just loving every minute of this. I'm just going to narrate a quick story. When you told me about this for our viewers, is that it's like a child who is doing drawing or painting. And then as adults, we impose our ego by telling the child to draw or paint between the lines. And then, yes, he or she might do it, but it's not his or her expression anymore. It's not their true feeling. That's the distinction between the craft and the art. Is craft could be polished and everything, but it could have little value.
Exactly.
I love the distinction. I love the distinction.
Well, I think it's vital. And I think we have to be as good at our craft as we can be. But on the other hand, as I say, craft doesn't produce the art. That comes from inside you. And anything you can do that, how can I put it? When you shoot for yourself, the you comes out naturally. Your unconscious grabs onto greenhouses, onto snowy fields, onto this, that, and the other thing. And it may be, or like on those rocks those circular rocks, what happens is, if you photograph yourself and save the stuff that really matters to you, then you can go back and through your work and you can say, here was what remains constant. Here's what's changing in both the subject matter and the approach. You can say, why? What happened about then? Literally, you write your own story when you photograph yourself. But if you don't photograph yourself, you don't say anything about you.
Wow.
It's like
Thank
the parent.
you.
Yeah.
So Freeman, it's been how many years since we last saw each other?
I think, Art, it was before my transplants.
Okay. Yeah, well, it definitely was that. You were out on the West Coast. What's a typical day or week look like for you right now? Are you going out and shooting every day?
No, I have no such thing as a schedule and no such thing as a typical day. And well, as the days get longer now, I'll be getting up earlier and earlier. One of the things that I've done to assure I have a happy childhood, I've created a gigantic 3.5 acre rhododendron and azalea garden since.
Nice.
And so believe me, as spring comes, I'm out there from the moment I can see until God knows when. I always have a sleep in the middle of the day for up to 2 hours. And then I'll go back out. And I will not do workshops during that period of peak bloom. I just go there to be. And it's kind of the closest thing I can come to heaven on earth, I think. Yeah. And the reason for that, I'll tell you, when I was a little boy, 8 years old, I grew up on a farm. And on my 8th birthday, my father woke me up at 5 o'clock and he said, from now on, I'm going to call you to help around the barns with the cows and the pigs and the hens and everything, which I did until I left for university at 18. I was his unpaid employee for 10 years. I wanted to, and I knew all about growing vegetables, you believe you me, but I wanted, and I created a little flower garden by the house. And I loved this little thing. My father thought this was a pure waste of my time. It wasn't practical. He didn't understand the spiritual value or the spiritual importance of that. Mm. So he did a lot to discourage it, me having it. He even would turn our pigs loose so they could go rooting in my flower garden. And he dug up a rose bush that he thought might spread, if you can believe it. Mm. In any case, after I came out of that transplant, I decided I was going to have a second childhood and I was going to have the flower garden that I never had. Oh. So I have it.
It's rhododendrons and azaleas.
Yeah, rhododendrons and azaleas, primarily. But it's in the forest, open forest behind my house. So it's mixed with all the native ferns and all kinds of native plants.
Nice. Beautiful.
I'm not sure that it's the largest, not that this matters, but I don't know of a larger garden in Canada devoted solely, well, primarily to rhododendrons and azaleas. But there's a lot. I'm growing about between 1,500 and 1,600 plants at the moment.
There's a symbol, there is a symbol in right there in that, but that's a whole different topic. As we come to the end of this, I do have one final question to both Art, you, starting with you, and then Freeman. But before that, we're going to do something different. I want to actually ask a question to all our viewers. And the question is, based on this conversation about symbols and meaning, what symbols have you discovered in your life? And what meaning has that, shown to you? I'd love to know. If you want to feel comfortable sharing on, via comments, it'll be interesting to see how pervasive the symbols and meaning, how relevant it is to all of us. I can certainly think of some, but that's an invitation to all our viewers to also participate in this conversation, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook. Please do that. And with that, the final question as we wrap this up, to both of you, starting with you, Art.
Why do I always have to go first?
Because Freeman is so good looking. Freeman is going to have the last word. That's why.
Okay.
And the question is, what's your takeaway from this? I mean, this is such an interesting topic that Freeman talked about. What is your own personal takeaway from this?
Well, I think Freeman, my takeaway is Freeman is a man that has come into full bloom. He is a man that has lived well his whole life. I mean, of course, he's had the physical issues that he was talking about, but he's always been true to himself and a keen observer. He's had a rich life, and look how at 62 years old, Freeman, you are full of life and energy, and I think that comes really from the creative processes that are going on within the body. And you can be 100 years old and still have that zest to get up out of bed and go out and discover. And that you see with Freeman. When he will be 100, he will be out, no doubt, looking and creating. And I think that's the takeaway, is somebody that has passion, who's very intellectual about his work, but always, always an artist first and foremost, photographer second, I would say.
Art, I'll have to correct you about one thing.
Okay.
I was 62 when I had the transplants. I'm 83 now.
I was flattering you. Do you not know when a man is flattering you?
Well, thank you. I
Yeah.
accept. So,
82, well lived. A great 82.
I love the word you use in full bloom, because it also is a metaphor just for the azalea and the rhododendron gardens you spoke about. Freeman, the question to you as we wrap this up: having lived the life you have lived, yes, you're 83. That's impressive. What you know now? Had you known earlier, what changes would you have made, and what's the advice you would have for all of us, having known what you know now?
That's a very difficult question, because, and I'm going to say something, and I mean it, because you're not the first person I've said this to. The best 3 years of my life, the best time of my life, has been the last 3 years.
Mm.
And there is a richness and a fullness to being old. I mean, look, that I never dreamed was possible. When I was young, I thought anyone over 60, they were just condemned to rocking chairs and rheumatism. Well, was I wrong? And if I were to go back, I don't think I'd want to go beyond 35. It took me at least to 35 to get some of the crap out of my system. But I don't know if I'd do something differently. Yes, I think I would try to be more honest all of the time. And by that, I mean, not always to be nice, but to be honest. I think
that's a tough one. That's a tough one to adhere to.
Yeah, it is tough.
Like, sometimes I'm really nice to Parimal, but I should be really honest to him.
I saw that coming from a mile. I knew that's going to happen. Hey, as we wrap this up, I do want to say, Freeman, thank you, Art. Thank you very much. To all our viewers, I'm just going to say this, right? Going back to the topic of symbols and meaning, Freeman and I and Art, we have been talking since December, when he emailed, and I never got the email. I emailed him. He never got my email. Even up until yesterday, we were not quite sure we're going to have this because of crazy storms that are happening right now in Freeman's house, that we were prepared to cancel this, maybe reschedule this. And against all odds, we had a flawless session and a very interesting session, along with a record turnout for this one. So I think that in itself, this particular talk in itself is a symbol that good things are, will continue to happen to you, Freeman, and to all of us and our audiences as well. So with that, I want to thank you again. And all of you, please do share if you like this, consider sharing and subscribing to YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you very much, Parimal. Thank you, Art. It is so good to see you again.
It's so nice to see you as well.